Okay, everybody, welcome. My name is Michael Markowsky, and I'm going to be showing you how to paint over the next 40 classes. Whether this is the first one you watch and the only one you watch, or the first of all 40, well, welcome. This is my studio. I live here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and I have a quite ambitious number of paintings that to occupy us over the next little while. So I'm really excited to have you join. I see, all these people here on the chat just blowing up here. So, and I asked everyone to let me know where you are on planet Earth, so I have some idea of who all you fabulous people are. And I mean, just taking a quick look, I see a lot of people from Canada, Ontario, Vancouver, Edmonton. I see California, a few Californias, Moncton, New Brunswick, Ottawa, Brampton, Vancouver. So people from all over. I know in my drawing class that I just finished, and there's 40 episodes, you can go back and watch all those and learn how to draw if that's of interest to you. We had people from all over the world, from India, from Florida, from California. I mean, just it's really cool to be able to connect with all of you, because usually when I'm teaching, I just teach people in like the school that I teach at here in Vancouver, Emily Carr University. So it's so neat to have this global audience of people who are really excited and interested in possibly picking up a new creative skill or coming back to painting for the first time. So let's get right into it, because I'm sure you're excited and interested to paint. So I've sort of deliberately left, like, rather than setting everything up and having everything ready, I'm going to set up with you so that you kind of have an idea of how I would begin. So a few of the things we're going to need is maybe 1 or 2 canvases, right? So if you've got a couple of canvases, often they come in some sort of plastic. So I'm just going to open this up. Now, in the previous video, we talked about using canvas boards or actual canvas. So the distinction being, here's another one, stretched across canvas. So neither one is better or worse, they're just kind of different. One's got a little spring and this one's a little more solid. So I'm going to have a couple of those ready. And I've got all my paints, and I know everyone's got different kinds of paint, different brands of paint, but ideally you have 2 reds, 2 blues, and 2 yellows. Oh, there's my other blue. Okay, and we're going to squeeze those out onto a palette in a second. I've got some paint brushes, and these paint brushes are ones that I bought from, I think this one was from Opus Art Supply here in Vancouver, and this one was from Michael's. And so I'm going to open these up. I have back there, I got hundreds of other ones, some that are kind of expensive, but I want to try to use as much as possible the same materials you guys are using. So I'm getting everything out of the box here. I guess they're taped in here. So you'll notice when you get your paints or paint brushes, they often come with these plastic tubes on the top. Usually I throw them away. The only reason you might want to keep them is, let's say you're going on a trip somewhere and you don't want your brushes to get damaged. You might want to have, I also have a drawer full of these little these plastic nibs, because your brushes, if you leave them in water or they kind of get banged up, they can kind of bend, and then they take on this forever bend on there, and it can be a real pain to pretty much once they, it's like a shirt that gets too wrinkled and you can't iron it out. So, you know, I'm just going to open both of these up. Why not? Sorry if I'm making a big loud sound here on my lapel microphone. So we got paint brushes. The next thing is some water. I'm going to put some water in my jug here. I'm going to fill it not too much, just a little bit at the bottom here. So give me 1 second. Okay, so that's, you know, I'll just, I can't really show you from the side. That's probably enough paint, or water, sorry. Sometimes people fill it all the way up to the top. You know, I don't think it's really going to help clean your brush. You don't want to have too little in there either, of course. Okay, so, and then the next thing is our palette. I had this crazy idea that I was going to do a whole bunch of things, of course, right before the show started. So I got a little carried away. So I'm going to put some paint on here in a moment, but maybe before we even begin painting, I want to do a little bit of drawing on these canvases so that we have a place to begin. Because what we're going to do is we're going to paint a color wheel on here today. And if you've never painted a color wheel, maybe I'll show you what one looks like. Here, cool. Let's go to this view. So here's the quick. So type in color wheel, and you can see there are lots of possibilities for what a color wheel looks like. And the one that we're going to do is something that I've developed over the years that has served me really, really well and helped me make all the paintings that I've made. So, you know, you've probably seen something like this. You can buy these kind of things in the art supply store. And I do have one, but I'm not going to bring it out just yet because we want to try to do all of this ourselves rather than just refer to, you know, a machine-made grid. And one of the main reasons we want to be able to do that is, you know, it's all fine and dandy to look at one of these things and say, okay, that's how it works. It's another thing to actually do it yourself, and even more specifically to do it, not only do it yourself, but to do it with the colors you have, because the colors you have are going to dictate the colors you can get, right? So these six, or we've got black and white in here, which we're not going to use today, but the 6 main colors that we're going to use are going to determine the colors that are possible from our color wheel. Okay, so let's grab our pencil here, and let's say I'm going to show you 2 separate kinds of color wheels that we can make today. One is going to look like a wheel, and one is going to look like a rectangle. So you're welcome to do both of them. The rectangular one might just look a little bit more like an artwork that you could hang potentially on the wall, and the other one is going to, I think, also look nice, but is going to be more useful for us from a practical guide perspective. Like, so you may also want to keep it near you in your studio and hang it up so that you can refer to it. Okay, so the first one we're going to do is, let's say I'm going to use this larger canvas here. So maybe I'm just going to back this out so you can see. Okay, looks like it's in focus. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a circle on this canvas, and we're going to try to go. Let's say I've got a jug of paint here. Now, if I put this jug of paint on this, it's going to, because it's got a bit of spring, it's going to make an impression. So, oops, there's some fuzzes on from the studio floor there. Okay, so you could try to eyeball that. Maybe, maybe if you can't see, I'm just gonna, you don't want to draw this too dark, but there might be some people who can't see that, so I'm just gonna make that a little bit darker, right? And it doesn't matter if it's like this or like that, right? Ultimately, what we're going to do is we're going to paint something that looks like this, right? So that's just kind of your bit of a heads up as to where we're heading today. That's what we're going to paint. So in order to figure out where these circles are, because we want 15 circles, right? The way that I do this is, and let me see. I think I'm going to paint mine like that, I think. So, because I might want to write stuff along the edges here. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to divide this in half. So you would draw lighter than I am, because if you want to be able to erase or even paint over it, the lighter you draw with your pencil, the easier it is to erase or paint over it. The darker you do it, the harder it is to do that. Now, up here, I'm gonna draw this. I'm gonna put a little circle here like that. Now, if you want to make this, where did I? Oh, I just realized I put some change in my pocket for this purpose, and then I put on my painting pants. So let's draw a couple little circles up top there like that. So it looks like a frog with funny eyes or something, right? And then I'm going to draw another one. You see I'm kind of just drawing right in the middle of that line. Okay. So I got one up here, two down here. Okay. Now we're going to turn this kind of into the peace sign, right? The peace symbol. All right, I'm going to draw a couple lines going off there like that and that. I guess maybe it could be a little bit, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Once you learn how to do this, you can recreate it in any way you like. So I'm going to do that in two little circles on this side, two little circles on this side. Okay, if I draw this line up to here, I'm going to put one there. And one here. Okay. So let's start with this right now. See, this is kind of lopsided. We're going to be painting over here, and when we paint over it, we can make any changes or corrections as we wish. So up here, this, you know what? I'm just going to write on here Y. That's going to be for a yellow. And that's going to be free. And again, you want to write this lightly, because this is anything that comes off this pencil tip or a pen could get mixed into our colors, and that could drive us nuts later on. So I'm writing these things kind of dark, but you can think at home to draw a little bit lighter. So here's yellow, red, and blue. Oh, my wife's bringing me my tea. Look at this fantastic service here. Thanks, my love. Thank you, darling. Okay. I think it's very important to have something to, like a snack or a drink or something to sip on or munch on, especially if you get a little bit confused, right? You're just like, I'm going to take a second to have a little munch on something. Okay, so these are going to be our yellows. These are two reds, two blues. Okay. And then what color do we get when we mix yellow and red together? Yellow and red make orange, right? And what color do we get when we mix yellow and blue together? Is green. Although, this is totally random, but this is a book that is actually quite good that I got years ago called Blue and Yellow Don't Make Green. But it's a little more, that's super technical painting stuff. Okay, so anyway, red and blue, when we mix them together, make violet or purple, right? So this is going to help us as we start mixing colors to know what goes where. Okay. Now, we can also, between these, we can add, we're going to put a little circle in between these. You can see there's way too much space there and there, so we can, as we paint this, make some changes. Okay, because these are going to be the in-between colors, or so the orange, green, and violet are called secondary colors. These colors that are in between are called our tertiary colors, and then the yellow, red, and blue are our primary colors. So primary, secondary, tertiary. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to label this out a little bit so that we are ready to start painting. Now, depending on how much space you have on your canvas, I could, let's say, back this out and put some, oh, that's a funny looking circle. Oh, geez, look at this. Okay, so the great thing with canvas and painting is that, okay, so just ignore those right there. The great thing with painting is that I can paint over any of my mistakes. So I'm just going to expand this. Right, so I'm going to see how many circles I can get if I go around here. Let's just, I probably should have practiced this beforehand. You know what? That's a bad idea. So I'm going to paint over that as we go. Never mind my big crazy circles here. Here's my big eraser coming out here to save my butt. Now, you know, one of the things that part of my philosophy of teaching is about allowing people to see me making mistakes. I've done a lot of teaching all over the place, and I've actually, believe it or not, deliberately made little mistakes because I want, especially when I'm working with young people, to know that it's okay to make mistakes. And mistakes aren't the end of your life or the end or ruining of any kind of artwork. It's sometimes actually good to make mistakes because they can open up new possibilities and we can kind of see things and do things we didn't expect to do, right? So, or that's this is what I tell myself when I make mistakes. Or happy accidents, as Bob Ross says. Okay, so let's, again, this is the goal that we're going to create. And just as a little tease, that's what we're going to do next class. But we're not there yet, so, and you probably won't figure out exactly what we're going to do. Now, I'm just going to do another quick little drawing on another canvas. And this will give you an idea of maybe something you could do as well. So this is going to be maybe my little bit more artistic, abstract color rectangle, I guess you might call it. So I'm going to do this kind of quickly because maybe not everyone wants to follow this. But so I just divide it in half. You see my lines aren't straight. I'm not someone who's big into rulers. I almost failed high school because I was so bad at math. And then I started my own carpentry company, which involves a lot of math. So, you know, I'm glutton for punishment. Oh, and what thing I'm doing down here, this bottom one, I'm going to turn into thirds. So, and then this one up here into quarters. And again, I'm just going to write here, this is a yellow, this is a yellow, this is a red, this is a red, this is a blue, and this is blue. This is going to be for my violet. This up here is going to be for my orange. This is going to be for green. Okay? So if you want to do this, you're welcome to do that. This is going to be the main thing we're going to work on. But I just want to show you that a fun, different way of making a color rectangle. Okay, so I've got a rough version of my color wheel drawn out here. So the next thing I'm going to do is start putting paint onto my palette. Now, if you watched the previous video, you saw the different options. If you just want to use wax paper, or you want to use like a piece of plastic or glass. I have glass somewhere around here. And so, oh my goodness. This just shows you this is brand new paint with all the darn plastic out there. So much plastic on this planet. Ah, it drives me nuts. So, oh, and I just about punctured the tube there. Come on. So, I've got 2 yellows, right? 2 yellows, and as I said, 2 reds and 2 blues. And they're not just any reds and yellows or blues. They are warm and cool colors. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to label these, just so that maybe when you're at home, you can kind of see what I'm doing. I'm looking at these 2 colors, and we have a full episode where we're going to talk about warm and cool colors and what it is and how we deal with it. So I'm not going to go in depth now, but I want you to, let's say, look at your 2 yellow colors. One of them should look kind of orange-like, right? So you notice this one almost has like an orange quality, especially compared to this one. So that orange quality means that it is a warm color, right? So I'm going to put warm on there. I'm going to write it actually on there with a Sharpie. Okay, so, and I actually do this with my paint anyway, for myself, not just for the classes I teach, but just helps me know, just sometimes when you get into the act of painting, you kind of forget what you're doing, and you need a little, or I do anyway, some prompts to remember what I'm doing. Okay, so the other yellow, in comparison to this one, has a little bit more of a lemon yellow, like a really bright, saturated color that it may even kind of start to look a little bit lime-like it's almost verging on a little bit of a green. Now, when you look at it, you're like, oh, I don't see any green in there. Sure, but compared to this one, where it's got a little bit orange, this one, you know, is often this is called primary yellow, and so this one is actually going to be our cool yellow. Right, so I'm just going to write that on there. Cool yellow, so I don't forget, right? So I've got 2 different colors here, or 2 different color temperatures of paint. Okay, so why don't we're going to do this to the other colors as well. So I'll do the red here in a moment. Let's look at the blue. So I should also have 2 different blues. And this could be a little bit tricky depending on the quality of your monitor and on your computer screen. But again, we have here also a warm and a cool blue. Which one's which? Well, if you used my recommendations of what to buy, then hopefully you have something like this. This is an ultramarine blue. An ultramarine blue is a... That's probably not going to be very visible on the screen. This old Sharpie is on its last leg, so the ultramarine blue is warm blue. And one way that I can tell that it's a little bit warmer is it's almost a little bit purpley or violet, right? When I look at it, there's almost a little bit of it just has that, I was gonna say, it just has a warm quality or purpley quality. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a little bit more of a purple violet quality. And so essentially that means that there's a tiny bit of red pigment in there. So in my ultramarine blue is a warm blue. Now the other blue is, this says primary cyan on the Amsterdam paint. Now this one is a cool blue. It looks like I wrote cobble there. Like a cob of bread, or not, a cob of corn bread. What are you talking about? So cool. And one way I can tell this is a little bit more of a cool blue is that I don't see any purpley quality in here at all. If anything, it's almost a little bit of a teal quality, like it's it's verging towards a bit of green, right? And so that's going to make it a cool color, right? So are you starting to see a little bit of a theme here, that the yellow, the cool yellow, verges towards green, and the cool blue also verges towards green, right? And then the warm yellow verges towards orange versus the warm blue verges towards red, right? So they're verging towards the red. Okay. Now, this next one here, we're going to label our red colors. So what is what? Now, on the screen, because I have a computer screen I'm looking at right here, the live view, they look almost indistinguishable, right? And that's why this might be even more important than ever to label these colors, so when you're reaching for them, you kind of like, okay, I'm reaching for the right one. Okay. So I just want to make sure, I'm just going to pop the chat here in case people are really losing their mind and can't figure out what they're doing. If you do have any questions, let me know and I'll try to answer them in real time. So the color that is our warm red, and in this case it's the Naphthol red medium. So this one is our warm red. And the warm red has a bit of that fire engine quality, right? Often people would think of this as your primary red. So it's the kind of red that is kind of verging towards orange, right? So there's almost a little bit of yellow in there. What's another color? I'm trying to think of things that most people would, I just think of it as like a fire engine or a fire hydrant kind of color, right? Versus the cool red, in this case is a magenta, and the magenta kind of has a bit of a like a pinkish kind of quality, right? It kind of looks like it looks kind of pink, rose kind of color, right? And so that's important because, well, maybe I'll just leave that at that here, because I was about to go into a big, I was going to go into what we're about to actually do here. Amy says, I need a munch when I'm confused. Yeah, so if you're having a little bit of trouble, have a little bit of tea or milk or coffee, and that usually makes things better, doesn't it? Okay, so now let's actually use this paint. I'm sure some of you are like, I want to paint, I want to get at it. Okay, so let's get at it. So the first thing we're going to do, and I'll just kind of show you this here on the color wheel, is we're going to work our way around the color wheel here. So we're going to start up this way and kind of go that way. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our warm yellow. This is the Azo Yellow Deep with the Amsterdam paint, right? And we're going to squeeze a little bit of paint here onto our palette, right? And it doesn't really matter where you're putting it, but what I try to do is put my colors in the same sort of orientation as my color wheel, just to help avoid confusions. Because, you know, if I start putting, you know, colors randomly over, then it gets confusing because I think like, okay, which one is the warm and cool one? Obviously, as you get to know your colors a bit more, it's easier, but I'm going to just separate this right here and put my warm yellow on here. Now, how much did I put on there? I actually may have put, that's an okay amount. I always tell people, try to put on as much paint on your palette as you would put on your toothbrush, or the toothpaste that you would put on your toothbrush, because it'd probably be a bad idea to put paint on your toothbrush. Okay, so we've got some yellow, the warm yellow here. I'll just put that up there, warm yellow. And then I'm going to take my warm red. Remember the one that's got the fire engine quality, or fire hydrant quality, or stop sign quality, right? So I'm going to take this off, and then I'm going to squeeze a little bit onto the canvas here. Okay, so you can see the two warm colors I've put onto the canvas, right? That's important. We want the two, again, because we have all these other choices, right? I'm just going to move them off to the side so that I don't even think about them. We're not going to need them for another couple minutes here, because we're going to paint the, a few other things first here. Okay, so the warm colors. So I'm going to put these here. And I'm going to clear a little bit of space here for myself. Okay. So, and now I'm going to grab a brush. Now, again, if you were like me and you bought one of these paint sets, you've got a whole bunch of options. So which paintbrush do I want to use? Now, there's no right or wrong paintbrush ever, right? You can use whatever paintbrush you want. Maybe you only have one paintbrush, so that's the one you're going to use. Having said that, this one is an old one of mine. I'll just get that out of the way. There are some that might work better for different purposes. So personally, for this exercise, I'm going to use, so we have these flat brushes and round brushes, right? So I'm going to use this round brush, right? You see, I'm just kind of flicking it in my hands, because usually when you get a new brush, they're kind of stuck together as one. You know, I think they put something in there in the factory to keep them kind of nice and pointy. So I'm just kind of rubbing it so that I kind of break that seal, and then I can use it. Now, one thing a lot of people do when they're using acrylic paint is they add a lot of water to their brush. And I'm going to suggest that, at least for now, that we hold off on the water for a bit. Especially we got this nice clean brush, brand new brush, and we got fresh paint on our canvas. So we actually don't need any water at this point. And that's not to say that you might want not, or you may want to use water at some point, but I think for our purpose right now, I'm just going to take the water, or take the brush and dip it directly here. I'm just gonna prop that up a bit. So I'm gonna take my brush and I'm gonna get some paint on it. And you see I'm rubbing the brush into the paint, and then I'm kind of spiraling it around, right, to get the paint on here. And what I'm doing is I'm loading the brush up, as you might say, right? So if I just dip it in there, then I've just got paint on the outside. What I'm doing is I'm getting paint, you know, it's like getting the toothpaste into the bristles of the toothbrush. So now there's paint inside here, okay? So I'm going to take this paint, and just while I'm here, another thing you can do is if you've got too much paint on it, is what I often do is I spin it away. And while I'm doing that, it's going to help get that brush back to a sharper point, right? So, and that helps get rid of all that excess paint on there. Okay, so I got paint on my brush. Now, this Y over here, this is going to be where I'm going to put my warm yellow. So I'm going to go attack the canvas right here. Now, I'm just, as you can see, as I start painting this, I can see some of the pencil lines coming through, right? So that's an important thing to remember, is that acrylic paint is usually a little bit semi-transparent. And the more water I put on my brush, the more transparent that color is going to get, right? So if I want this to be solid yellow without any of those pencil lines there, then I would need to probably, unless I want to add some white to the paint, which will make it more opaque, and that's something else, but I would have to wait for this to dry. And the great thing with acrylic paint is that could be 5 minutes from now, that could be dry. And then I could do another layer of paint over top of it. I could also put more paint on my brush and apply it more thickly to the canvas. Okay, so there's my first one, my first circle on here. Now I'm going to paint. So this, you could imagine, was what we just did here. Painted that. And what we're about to do is start working our way towards this warm red. Okay. So, and this is, I think, really helpful to watch, is how, okay, so there you see, spun, and I think I just got some paint. This, by the way, is a shirt that I used to wear all the time, and it's kind of a little bit threadbare. And I was looking, I have a bunch of old painting shirts, but I was like, today I am going to christen a new painting shirt. So, you know, might as well just put a couple marks on here. Just, it's officially a painting shirt, right? Okay. There's no going back. So I'm going to now mix a little bit of red into this yellow, and I'm going to show you how little paint I need. Because often what people do is they just start mixing like little children, and then they make this big batch of color. Think of it like this is a soup, and we're putting a little bit of salt into that soup. We don't want to over salt it until we taste it, right? So I'm going to take my brush with the yellow, and I'm going to touch this red. Like, do you see how little paint I got on there? I mean, it's almost invisible, right? It's just this fraction. And now what I'm going to do is kind of in between here, I'm going to blend them out. So you see how that color is already changed. And you saw how little paint was on my brush. I mean, virtually nothing, right? So let's try doing this again. I'm going to get a little bit more paint. And again, I want to be careful. I'm not going right in here. I'm going to contaminate this with red. So I got some, because I want to try mixing this again. I'm going to add just a little bit. Wow, look how quickly that changed. So maybe I need a little more yellow. Now, the rule is it's easier to darken a color than it is to lighten a color. Once a color is dark, you're going to need a lot of paint to lighten it back up. So that's why you want to kind of be a little bit careful about how quickly you dive into these colors. Now, let's say, because I got quite the gap here, I'm going to move this over and make another circle right here. And again, I can always get some paint to, some white paint, and I can paint that out and clean it up and make it look real pretty. So this here is, it's almost like a bit of a peachy color, right? Oh, and you know what I was going to do on this, so here's this other one that I started. I'm going to put that color in this corner here. Now, obviously a big paintbrush would make this process easier and faster. But the one thing with when you use a big paintbrush is you lose accuracy, right? Because now you can cover space much faster. And one of the things that I'm going to encourage you to do is, rather than mix up these big batches of color, is to try to mix the color again to try to match it. And in doing that, you're going to learn a little bit about how to use the color and to mix the colors, right? So I'm going to now, so we've got one step over here, right? So if this is where we began, we've got this one. Now we're going to do orange. So orange is technically about like halfway between yellow and red. So I got more yellow on my brush, and I'm going to add a little more red to it. Right, and then see what I'm doing, spinning my brush here to get paint. Because sometimes yellow paint or red paint can kind of hide in the bristles, and you can get a little bit of surprise when you actually paint on the surface of the painting. All right, so that looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit too red. And there we go. So then I'm going to paint this right here. And I know I'm driving people crazy with the way that these things not being in the right space and me moving them over. I'm doing this to show you that I am going to create the sloppiest version. Mine is going to be sloppier than anybody else's, so you can't possibly do a worse job than me. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to keep working my way towards the red. And all I'm going to do, now I've got this color here, I'm not going to add any more yellow. I'm just going to add more red to this. All right, so let's see what this looks like. So I got a lot of paint on my brush. Oh, and look at this. So I was going to paint this as well. And so I forgot to paint a color there. So I'm just going to paint this one here. Usually when I teach these classes in person, I have a template that I just go around and I create the color wheel for everybody, and everyone just kind of paints into the empty spaces. But unfortunately, I'm not able to, I wasn't able to visit your house over the past little while and do a little bit of painting or drop off a template, so I apologize. Oh, look at all the comments here. So next I'm going to paint my first pure red onto the canvas here, my warm red, right? But before I do that, I'm actually going to wash my brush, right? Because I don't want any yellow on my brush contaminating that red for my first red spot here, right? So I'm going to take this, I got a little piece of paper towel, and you see I'm just going to rub this paint off before I even dip it in the water, right? Because this gets as much paint off as possible, so that way my water, when I'm mixing it in here, see, it hardly changes color, because most of the paint is in this tissue. Because that's one of the things I see people do all the time. They got a brush loaded up with color, they dip it into the water, and then they're immediately, oh, I gotta go wash my water, change my water, because my water's all red or whatever, right? And then all of this, you know, acrylic paint goes down into the sink and down into the sewer and then out into the ocean and kills a bunch of fish, and or goes into the fish that you later eat, and that's not good for anybody, right? So the more, this can go into the garbage. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my brush that is now, you know, it's clean, and it doesn't matter if it's totally dry. You know, if it's not totally dry, then I'll brush it onto my sleeve, which is why when I have my you'll see this painting, this new painting shirt by the end of the 40 classes that's going to be covered, because I often do this to dry my brush off, right? So I got this color, or empty clean brush. I'm going to dip it into the paint here, and then I'm going to do that same thing. So where I've got paint on here, and then I'm just kind of spinning it around so that I can load up this brush, fill it up with color. Boom. Okay. So now I'm going to paint this red right here. And I'm going to do the same on this canvas. So one of the things that may happen is, I'm sure some of you are looking at these colors and going, huh, there's not too much of a difference between these two colors. This is pure red, and this is red with a little bit of yellow in it, right? So what, do I need to make it lighter or darker? What I would say is, if you're not happy with the mixtures right now, is just let the color dry, right? Because if I try to go in here and add more yellow, it's just going to make a bit of a mess. The best thing with acrylic paint is just to let it dry off a little bit and then go back in later on, okay? So, and I'm just looking at this. I'm going to paint that orange. So if I want to paint that orange, I want to get some paint off my brush, and then I'm going to add some yellow back into here. Let's see. I'm going to paint this in here. So ideally, each step in the process, you know, you're kind of creating like those paint swatches that you see at the hardware store when you go to buy some paint, or you're just browsing the aisles. You want kind of little steps that are kind of nice, and there's kind of a nice gradation of one to the other. Of course, I forgot to paint that one, but maybe I'll come back to that in a moment, or maybe depending on how far people are right now. So it's cool. We got 75 people following along right now. I wonder if everybody's painting. I wonder if people are just watching right now, trying to decide whether this is something they want to do or not. If you are just watching and, you know, observing, and you're thinking like, is this something I want to do? Then, you know, and maybe at this point, you're probably, if you're still watching and we're almost an hour in, you looks like you probably are convinced, right? So it might be helpful to then see, okay, this is what we're gonna do. Okay, that's what I can do, and I'll go and get all of my material. So, you know, I see that, you know, this orange, you know, could have been a little bit lighter. Maybe it's a little bit too much red in there. That's okay. It's okay if these aren't, if they're not, you know, the perfect orange you were thinking about. What I really want you to do during this process is just to learn how to mix the colors and what they do. And as I said, you know, I've taught this class, or I don't think I've mentioned it before, but, you know, I've taught this class maybe, I don't know, 50, 60 times, and in person. And I also did a YouTube earlier version of this class, I don't know, 5 years ago, which has like, I don't know, 100,000 views or something. And each time I kind of learn something a little bit different as I teach it. So you'll see, if you go watch those old videos, I kind of do something a little bit different. But I don't know. I had a train of thought which has long left the station, and I forgot what I was going to say. So what I've done is I just went and grabbed a couple of rags. In this case, this is, I take my old, look at this, my old underwear. Just making sure there's no streaks on there. So this is my old underwear. I just cut up, and it makes great paint rag, right, for me to use. So, oh yeah, so what I was going to say is that, you know, often, you know, when people look at a color wheel, it's like pretty self-explanatory. You're like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's not really until people start doing it that they realize. Firstly, one of the things comments people tell me all the time is, wow, I'm surprised how quickly the color changed when I added another color to it. Because a lot of times, especially when people do this, their first instinct is just to like load up, put big globs of paint on there. And I'm always like, you really need a very little amount of paint to make this happen. And people are like, oh wow, you're right. Okay. Oh yeah, Heidi's saying mixed media canvases or paper works really well. So I have I think I mentioned it in the first video, but you know, this is my favorite kind of sketchbook. This Canson XL mixed media, because you can paint in watercolors, acrylic, oil paint on this paper. It's a little bit thicker, and it just stands up quite well to paint. So acrylic, watercolor, pen and pencil. I think they're somewhere around $15 to $20 at most art supply stores. Okay, so you can see there's still this writing on here, which is super annoying to me, but I'm just going to ignore it. So let's look at the palette now. So you notice I cleaned my brush, right? So there's no paint on my brush. And I'm now switching, I'm pushing these two colors that we've used so far. I'm just gonna literally move them off the table. I don't need them anymore at this point unless I wanted to kind of fix or change anything I've done. Now I'm taking out my cool red, my magenta red, the one that looks a little bit pink, right? I'm going to squeeze a little bit of that out onto my palette. Okay. I'm also going to squeeze a little bit of this warm blue out. Okay, so I've got my warm blue, the ultramarine blue, and I'm going to squeeze the toothpaste blob, level blob paint out here onto my palette. Okay, so those are the two colors I've used, right? And I got paint on my finger. Oh no, what am I gonna do? Oh, thank goodness I had a rag. Whew. I can tell you, when I teach these classes, sometimes people get really freaked out when they find there's paint on their hands, right? And the good thing is we've got soap, we've got water, we've got rags, and probably everybody at this point has got lots of hand sanitizer around, right? So I know I've got like a whole bunch of them behind the camera there that I've been stocking up on, and I'll probably, by the time I get around to using it, all the fluid in there will have evaporated. Okay, so what I'm doing, I've got my cool red, and I'm putting it on my brush. So this is the one that's got a little bit of a pink quality to it. All right, load up, and sometimes I just sort of dab it into the paint, and so now I got a nice full heavy brush, right? And now I'm going to paint in here. See, these circles are slowly getting bigger and bigger as I go here. Maybe, I don't know, I could use it, I could try to make an artwork out of it if I wanted to. We want to keep the inside blank though, because that's what we're going to use this for next class, is we're going to, like I mentioned or showed briefly, is we're going to draw some lines inside next class. So you want to keep the inside blank. So if anything, you could expand outwards, but keep the inside free. Right. So one of the things I noticed, most of these cool reds are often quite transparent, semi-transparent, so you could see more image of the pencil lines comes through when I'm using this cool red. And one thing, I will often accidentally say warm and cool in the wrong time, just because I sometimes get things mixed up. So if you're like, what? Just leave a comment, and I'll try to respond and correct myself. Cool. So people are saying that they're Marjorie's saying she's observing because she just tuned in late and didn't get her paints out and just watching. One of the great things with this YouTube channel is this is being recorded, and after the show's over, you can watch it again at your convenience. You could post a link on your Facebook page and say, hey, this is what I just did today. I was watching this guy and he taught me how to do a color wheel. Why don't you watch this episode, and then you can tune in and watch with me later on. Elaine says, how is the Canson watercolor aquarelle comparing to the paper you recommended? I think the watercolor paper is that sketchbook paper is would work really well on that paper. Like all of these principles apply to oil paint, watercolor paint, tempera paint, like gouache paint, house paint. I mean, any kind of paint, these same rules apply to it. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to work our way to the blue here. Okay, so and you're going to see the blue of all of these paints is going to radically change this color really quickly. So we want to remember how little red I needed to put on to modify that yellow. Well, same thing, right? So I'm going to take my red and I'm just going to dip it. Like, you literally, like, I mean, how much red or blue is on there? That's like look how quickly that color changed. Right? So I'm going to take more paint and put it on my brush here. Just because I want to. Okay, and I'm going to dip it. Oh, I think I might have put too much blue on there. Now, if you've done this and you made a mixture that is too dark too quickly, what I would do is rub the paint off. Try to get as much off your brush as possible. You saw how I was spinning it there. And I'm just going to kind of start a new mixture right here because it's going to take too much paint to. So I'm just kind of diluting it right here. And then I'm going to try painting it on here. Okay. So I look at that and I think, is there much difference here? Maybe I do need a little bit. Instead of going right to my blue, I'm just going to take a little bit of that previous mixture and add it to here. All right, so at this point, these two colors side by side aren't too different. It's just that this one maybe looks a little bit darker. Right? And of course, I forgot to do this one, so I'm just going to paint this in really quickly. One of the things that I personally like to do when I'm painting is to actually mix colors directly on the painting itself. I like my paintbrush to be a little bit dirty and have a little bit of the, so that the colors kind of smear and mix together a bit on the canvas itself. But as you'll see as we go forward. Okay, so I think you know where we're going next. I've got paint on here. I'm going to add a little bit more blue. Stir that up. And then I'm going to paint with it. And this one ideally would be right in the middle. Here. So as you're painting, some of you may notice, okay, I've got areas of the paint that are darker than others because the paint is thicker in places, right? So that's a quality of this particular kind of paint, and you can try to kind of brush it out, and like you've got bread on the counter that you're kneading and going to turn into a pizza, and you want it to all be the same thickness across, but it can sort of just drive you absolutely nuts trying to do that, because you start moving here and then all of a sudden it's too thin there, and then so it's like at some point you just kind of be like, okay, let's just put it in the oven and let's go. Okay. Okay, so I'm now going to add a little bit of more blue to this same violet mixture. All right, so I'm basically now just taking a scoop of blue and adding it to that violet. And then it just gives a nice good stir, and then let's paint it on here. And I forgot to. think my brain is a little bit fried today because the past week has been the first day of classes back at Emily Carr, which is the main art school in Vancouver, here at the University of Art. And needless to say, not only is it a crazy, every year is a little bit nuts when you go back to school, but because of having to teach everything online, it sort of makes things a little bit trickier than normal. Oh, that's weird. What happened there? My overhead camera is getting kind of hot, I think. So that is funny, isn't it? That was not expected. I wonder, I could use another camera here. 1 second. I'm just gonna... Amy, love, can you get me an ice pack from the... You got an ice pack?
You need an ice pack?
Yep. So just give me a second here. I'm gonna see if I can get another camera running to show you guys what's happening here. Camera overheated. That's funny. That's never happened to me before. I wonder. I guess it's just all these lights running here. Whew. And I'm feeling the heat too. I was saying this morning when I was teaching, it was freezing cold, and now it's too hot. So, just gonna put that up there, and we'll see if. Okay, we'll see how much we can do. So, I've got that last, what we would call like a blue-violet painted, and I'm going to paint that real quick here. That's another benefit of being able to paint and work from home is during my studio is in our basement of our house here. Is, if this had happened to me while I was on site painting and I needed a ice pack, well, where on earth would I have gotten an ice pack from? So, anyway. So you can see what I'm doing, just kind of quickly painting this in, is I'm, rather than mixing everything on my palette, I kind of roughly get the paint on there and I just start painting. Now this is something that takes a little bit of practice to be able to do that, but okay, so I've got, where's my rag? I'm gonna clean my brush off. Kimberly says, can we take a quick break? You could certainly take a break. I'm just gonna slowly continue on here. One of the things about this class is, if you need to take a break, just pause your YouTube, right? And it'll stop, and then when you're ready, you can just press play again, and you'll be a few minutes behind the live stream, but hopefully nothing will happen to me over that course of time. I should still be alive and well. Okay, so now I'm painting the warm blue here. Look at that beautiful ultramarine blue. Oh my goodness. And look at that circle, just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. one of the fascinating things with color and with paint is how, you know, there's a fantastic book. Let's see if I have it out around here, called Color by, I think it's Victoria Finley. I think that's the author's name. I think it's called Color, like Travels Through the Paint Box, I believe. I'll put a link to it in the description afterwards. And she sort of talks about the history of different kinds of paint and where pigments come from. And ultramarine blue, the main source of it on planet Earth is in Afghanistan. So you can imagine what happened after 9/11 is the price of actual pure ultramarine blue went through the roof. And the price of artists' paint of actual ultramarine blue became super expensive. Like, you could trade a tube of ultramarine blue for like a gold bar, right? I mean, a lot of paint today is synthetic and is made in laboratories and isn't pure original pigment. And so that's your, you know, this paint is probably all synthetic. I doubt there's probably much, if any, actual ultramarine pigment in these, just as there probably isn't any actual cadmium or any kind of toxic materials in these, because these are student grade. But that's the difference between when you say like, oh, why this paint tube is $12 at the art supply store, and then you know, like this one is, you know, $25. Like, what's this one's in, it's half the size. Why is that so much cheaper? Right? Because one tube of paint has the pure original pigment inside. Okay. So, and you saw I've washed my paintbrush, and now we're going to close the circle here. So, and I'm actually going to start from the yellow and work my way back to the blue. Okay, so I'm just going to curious how this, hopefully there don't no water drips into the canvas there. So anyway, or into the camera. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is get out our cool yellow, and I'll just kind of show you how I'm doing this. I'm going to squeeze some cool yellow out like that. And I'm going to take my cool blue. So as people have been asking me, you know, what are we going to be painting over the next 5 months together? And I have a whole bunch of paintings that I want. We're gonna try recreating some very famous paintings by people like Picasso, or I don't think we're gonna do a Picasso. I don't think I have a Picasso, but sorry, a Matisse and Van Gogh and Edvard Munch, Frida Kahlo and Sonia Delaunay, and so a lot of paintings that you're familiar with, you've probably seen in art museums. And so we're going to do that for like the first 20 episodes or so. And then once we've kind of mastered that, then we're going to start painting things like from flowers and, you know, cups and vases and fruit and vegetables, that kind of stuff. And then towards the very end, we're going to do some portraits of people, so that we kind of slowly build up and get more and more confidence as we go. And by the end, you should, I mean, basically I'm giving you a free art school education here. So, and if anything, some of the stuff I'm teaching you is stuff that I probably wouldn't have time to teach in art school, because art school is a little bit of, some of it was talking to some faculty the other day, it's like a race to the finish, like every semester. Whereas what's great about this is, you know, I can take my time, and if, who knows, if I wanted, I could just add another 20 classes halfway through here. So, next thing I'm going to do is I've got my brush nice and clean. That's really important. So when you're cleaning your brush, you want to make sure it's clean. And again, I've dried it off. And I'm going to dip into the cool yellow here. So I've got my brush into the cool yellow, loading it right up. So I got paint right into the bristles. And then I'm going to go right up here. And I'm going to paint over there. And one thing you may notice right off the top is this cool yellow is a little bit more transparent than the warm yellow. And I think now you can really see the difference between those two yellows. So I'm going to quickly paint this in. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to start mixing some greens. We're going to modify this cool yellow, and boy oh boy, this is going to be where you're really going to see how quickly the color changes. We barely need to add any blue to this yellow whatsoever. All right, I'm going to get some yellow on my brush, right? And I can even put some right here in the middle because I know I'm going to do some mixing right there. So I'm going to just put it there. I'm going to get some paint off my brush. And then I'm just going to move that out of the way. Right, I'm just going to touch that blue. Right, I mean, I didn't scoop in there. Right, and I start here and already, like, I mean, that was literally about the size of a grain of salt I put in there, and that color changed. Right, so let's see how this looks. Okay, maybe I'm gonna add even about the same amount in here. I want to make it just a little bit more greenish, green-yellow, so it becomes kind of lime-like. Okay, so we'll see, maybe it looks, you'll see a little bit more of a difference here. I think I was trying to say earlier before I lost my train of thought is that it's not important that you match up, you get like the perfect mixture of color, because there isn't any. Everyone's going to get a slightly different result each time when they mix those colors. What I just want you to have that experience of just playing with the color, of mixing those colors. And I think most people are really surprised by how little blue needs to go in there before that yellow starts to turn into green. Okay, so let's take a little bit more blue this time. And like, boom, look, I mean, just instantly changed, right? Get a little more. Okay. And let's see, that looks kind of pretty good. Okay. So I'm going to paint this in. There's music that's playing there. Hopefully it's not too distracting or too loud. Let me know if it is, or if it's too quiet and it's driving you crazy because it's just barely there. That music was written and composed by a dear friend of mine, one of the groomsmen at my wedding years ago, and his name's Samuel Davidson, a musician here in Vancouver, formerly, or technically I guess still in the band Brastronaut, although who knows if that band is ever going to tour or perform ever again. I've gone on tour with them several times, doing art, doing live animations and painting and all sorts of things while the band was performing, and that's how I got my little rock star experience without having to learn how to play an instrument, although I used to play an instrument many years ago. But anyway, so let's do the next green. Now this green is going to be a lot more bluish, so I'm just adding more blue into my mixture. Maybe I gotta get a little bit more paint in here. Okay. You can hear our daughter upstairs, my wife there. Sounds like they're having a blast. We have a 1-year-old daughter. Her birthday was a month ago, so her first birthday. Absolute, magically beautiful, amazing little girl. I'm a very proud papa. And honestly, one of the reasons why I'm doing all these classes is, I think, especially because how crazy the world has been, I think, you know what? If something were to happen to me suddenly, I want to be able to pass on as much knowledge as I have inside my head to my daughter as possible. So maybe you're watching this, Edie, 20 years from now or something. Okay, my dear, the next color we're going to do is the last color to complete the circle is our cool blue. Now, I almost dipped it right in there. What do I got to do? I got to wash my brush, right? Because this one is going to be just pure blue, right? I don't want to have any yellow on it because then it's still going to be a little bit greenish. Okay, nice clean. You know, when you have these white brushes, it can be helpful because you can see when your brush is nice and clean. Usually, once you use it a few times, the bristles start to kind of discolor. But for now, look at that. Okay, so it's kind of hard, you know, these colors, unfortunately, with the limitations of cameras and the web and everything, you're not going to be able to see this it won't show up as beautifully as it does for me with my own eyes. But if you're following along and you're doing it, you should be getting, and you're using the same paints that I recommended, you should be getting similar results. There shouldn't be too many weird surprises. The only odd thing that sometimes happens is people get their colors mixed up and they're painting things in the wrong places, and you know, let's say they put green in where the oranges go, and that can cause a little bit of confusion. But if you're, you know, I'm deliberately going is kind of at a slower pace to try to so I'm not leaving anybody too far behind here. Okay, oops. So let's We're an hour and a half in. So what I'm going to wrap up in about 10 minutes, and we'll call it a day. I'm also going to clean up before we finish too, just because, you know, this is my studio. I have the luxury of just putting my brush down and calling it a day. That's probably not the situation for most of you. Most of you are maybe painting at your kitchen table or dining room table or living room, and you know, you got family that might want to watch television and sit down, and you got to move things out of the way. So part of my approach with these is I want to try to clean up with you and just sort of pack everything away and show you how I would do some of that, and where I'm going to put things to dry so that they can dry without getting anything on them or fall on the floor and, you know, ruin the carpet and all that kind of stuff. So so you can see this here is I forgot to paint my violet, so I'll do that here in a minute, because I think these color wheels look really cool, you know, and when we're all done, that's going to be a kind of a cool image. You know, maybe I could hang it right up here, and then if I ever wanted to refer to it, I can just pull it down and look at it. And one of the things, you know, is, when was it? Last summer, I usually paint I do a lot of my painting in oil paint, but last summer I had to get a lot of painting done really quickly and then ship all the paintings, pack them up and crate them and send them out of town. And so I painted in acrylic paint for my own personal artwork, and so I went out and bought some new acrylic paints. You saw kind of behind me, I briefly showed, and I made one of these diagrams for that paint. And because I was like, I always tell students, you should make one of these diagrams so you know what kind of colors you're going to get before you start painting. And I did it all, and then, I don't know if you can quite see, but look how kind of muddy and brown these violets, these purples turned out, right? And what occurred to me in doing this is that my so-called cool red was still a little bit too warm. Still, you know, like there's very little difference between these two, and I needed a much more magenta, more pinkish, cool red. So after having done all this work, I reluctantly put all my paintbrushes down and went to the art supply store and got a different red, a more cool red. So there was more difference between these two, and then I mixed these colors. So you can see the difference here between those two results, like quite dramatic, right? Like this one, these colors are essentially brown and like a really dark blue. Now, this, and I'm not saying that this is wrong by any means. I would, in fact, most of the time, you're not going to be painting with these bright colors that are around the outside of the color wheel, right, that are in this diagram we've just created. Most of the time, you're not going to be painting with pure bright yellow and bright red and ultramarine blue, because those colors are fairly rare in the natural visual spectrum. Like if you just look around your living room or bathroom or studio or garage or wherever you are right now, if you look around, very few of the colors, even in my art studio here, I've got a lot of bright colored things, very few things are very brightly saturated, right? And so a lot of them are a little bit more muted, and we're going to talk about how to modify the colors, and we're going to create a value scale this time next week. So and that involves mixing in white and black into those colors. So if you don't have your white and black yet, that's okay, because we won't need them until next week. Okay. So, but anyway, just to kind of go back, is that even if you're an experienced artist, doing a color wheel, and then on Thursday, our next class is we're going to mix the colors across the color wheel. And it looks a little confusing now. We're going to take our time. We're going to do an awesome job. But it really helped me, because I would rather figure out what all my paints can do before I began painting than be kind of midway through a painting and be like, you know, gosh darn, something's wrong here. How come my colors are not, I'm not achieving the colors I want? And that's because I wouldn't have taken the time to really figure out what's happening. Okay. So, oh, and so Jeannie here is saying, might you please label the primaries on the wheel in cool and warm? Yeah, so actually, that's one of the things that I was going to do before we wrap up, is what I would suggest you do on the outside of your color wheel. Remember, we're going to paint on the inside. We're going to do all this stuff next class, is to write down the colors that you were using, right? So to literally take your paint tube, right? So I could even write down at the top, let's say Amster, because this would be different for different paints, right? So, you know, what sometimes happens is, you know, or I could talk from my own experience. I've done projects where I've traveled to other locations and made murals and things in a museum, and I show up with, you know, a bunch of my own paint that I've shipped with me. And don't get me started on how difficult it is to travel on the airplane with paint. You have to, you know, I've had to go through all sorts of security and get pulled over to the side, and I have my MSDS sheets that I've printed out showing that it's not going to cause the plane to explode, and they x-ray them. Anyway, but I've shown up at places and I've traveled, and I have all my paints, the paint that I think I'm going to use, and I get there and I use it all, and then I got to go to an art supply store and buy a different, and then of course I don't have the same paint, and I got to use a different brand, slightly different color. I would mix another one of those wheels with that new color, because I want to know how this new tube of paint is going to affect this, right? So Amsterdam standard. Now, maybe you're using golden or opus standard, right? So this is the brand name here, and this is my cool yellow. Now this, you may or may not want to label you're like, oh, it's so beautiful right now, I don't want to touch it. Okay, that's fine. But this is my cool yellow, or maybe I might get a Sharpie out and do this over the week before next class. So this here is that color, right? So that I know going forward, this is what that color is going to look like, right? And so obviously we could go around and we could do this. So this right here is my cool blue, and that's primary cyan. So that's the actual tube, right? So these are the cool colors. Okay. And then here's my warm blue. And where is it? It's my ultramarine, right? Wish I had that book out here. I could show you all. Color. Okay. So ultramarine blue, and then I'm going to go here to cool red, and that's my magenta. Primary magenta. Oh, sorry, I was a little off camera. Where's... Oh, I remember moving these off the side because I didn't want to touch them. So this right here is my warm red, and that's... Water's dripping off that, probably seeping into my camera. Let's see if that camera still works. So next class, naphthol. Red medium, and then lastly my warm yellow, and this is azo yellow deep. Sue says, can I use golden and Amsterdam on the same palette? Absolutely. So there's no, I'm sure if you talk to a sales rep from each company, they would tell you, oh no, you don't want to be mixing our paints and sully them with a cheaper brand or any other brand. You know, it's like you know, you're taking your car to get it fixed at the dealership. Oh, the dealership is the only place you want to get it fixed. You don't want to take it anywhere else. So they're going to put some bad third-party part in there, and it's just going to break down. Well, I've never noticed any problem mixing any paint. I mean, technically, what's interesting about paint is that it's chemistry, really. I'm surprised there aren't more scientists that are into painting, because you're mixing paint, these things that are different chemical substances together, and you're getting not really new chemicals, but you're getting new colors that result from the mixtures of those pigments. And I mean, I mean, every paint is made slightly different, and they might have different chemicals. But it's not like you're going to mix them together and then all of a sudden they're going to explode like baking soda and vinegar or something, right? You know, it's possible that they might dry at a slightly different speed when you mix a different brand of paint with another one. But for the most part, you're not going to notice any difference. So golden is a little bit more of professional. Assuming you're using the golden heavy body, I think it's called, are the kind of their flagship, the professional brand of acrylic paint. And these Amsterdam are the cheaper student grade paint. But you shouldn't notice, the only difference you may notice is that the golden colors might be a little bit more opaque than the cheaper ones. The cheaper ones tend to have like filler in there to kind of make it, to extend the paint. And you notice that when it's like putting water into your ketchup or something, right? if you're really cheap, which I remember, sorry Dad, but you used to do that when we were kids. And it was gross. So, you know, if then I'm trying to make some kind of crazy analogy, but I think you get the idea. I wouldn't say it's any problem whatsoever, but I would try doing, you know, if you were to reintroduce the new colors, to mix it and see what the results are. Let me see. Can you mix the paint brands and get the same results? Yeah. Thank you for the class. Can't wait for the next one. Awesome. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start cleaning things up. Now, you probably notice at this point, your painting is going to be pretty dry. Now, like, so if I touch that orange, right, nothing comes off. Now, I wouldn't just go start rubbing here. One way to tell whether the painting is dry or not is to kind of hold it up to the light and to kind of bend it. And you'll see that some parts are going to look a little bit shiny and reflective, and that tells you the paint is still wet, right? If it still has that really kind of shiny quality, generally for acrylic paint, that means it's still wet. Now you can add mediums into the paint, and I have like dozens of mediums that we can add to the paint, and I'm going to show you that stuff as we go, because we can add those things, and it creates opens a new world when it comes to acrylic paints. But for our purpose, we're just using it right out of the tube. The shiny paint means it's still wet. So if it's still wet, you wouldn't want to, stack it into a bookshelf and put another book against it, because that paint is going to peel off or it's going to stick onto something else. Same sort of thing, like if you're about to get on the bus, and you sit down and it banks against your body, this paint's going to come onto your clothes. So this is still wet. Now, if in this situation there's not a lot of paint on here, I could easily, let me see, hang this somewhere, put this up on a shelf like that, and let it dry, and it's going to be fine. If I had, and we're going to experiment with painting kind of thickly in a couple months from now, so we have kind of big gobs of paint on here, and when that happens, you want to be careful, because if I let my painting dry on its side, that paint could start to droop down, and if it's a hot environment, it could slide down the canvas. So if that was the case, I would just leave it. If I could find somewhere where I could let it sit dry, like up on a shelf like that, kind of out of the way, right? So other things that are going to affect the drying time are kind of the humidity of your environment. So if you live like in California and you're next to the water, right, it might take a little bit longer for your painting to dry than it would if you were living in Denver or Calgary or Banff, Alberta, right, where places that are kind of high up and are very dry, right? Those paintings are going to, if you're painting in Denver, Colorado, right, you're painting by like that first yellow is dry by the time you start painting that orange, right? Which can be really great for some people. For some people, it can be very frustrating. So also, paintings are going to dry faster in warmer climates than in colder climates, right? So if you're painting in the middle of December and you're watching this video a few months after we filmed it, this painting could take, you might be all the way done and you're washing your brushes, and still that first paint you applied is still a little bit, that paint might still be a little bit wet, right? Versus if you're in a warm climate, dry climate, it's going to dry very, very fast. Okay, so I'm going to take this and I'm just going to move it out of the way so it can dry. I'm happy with that. Maybe I just, I was like, I'm going to put this away. You know what? I'm going to finish painting this really, really quickly, because it drives me crazy when I have my own paintings that need a little bit extra love. So I won't be able to fall asleep tonight if I don't take care of that. Did I put the right paint on there? Yeah. So I'm just going to quickly paint this in. Depending on the kind of material you were using for your palette, if you were just painting on a piece of wax paper, then you could easily just take that wax paper, fold it up, and throw it into the garbage. And this is a reason why you don't want to use too much paint. Often when I teach these classes in person, people squeeze out big gobs of paint and onto their palettes, and I'm like, oh my goodness, all that's going to go into the garbage because there's no way you're going to be able to use all that paint, right? So it's always easier to squeeze more paint out onto the canvas than it is to put the paint back into the tube, right? So if you're painting on wax paper, you could just take that and then toss it into the garbage. It's possible that you could, I've never tried this. I have heard some people trying to wrap their paint up and put it into the fridge. I mentioned in the earlier video that I've got this, put a little Zorro stripe in there that drove me a little bit nuts. So likewise, I'm going to take this, and you can see there's still a few little places where you can see it's shiny, right where I just painted it, and a few other little places. But for the most part, everything else is dry, right? So I'm just going to take that, and I'm going to put it here to dry. But this is, I could paint on, I could use a piece of plexiglass. This is like a sponge, basically. So I can just put this palette, of course, doesn't fit in here, but if I did, oh, it does kind of fit in there. So, in fact, let's just do this. This water is, after a session of painting, it's not that dirty, right? So I get it in here into the sponge, which is going to soak up all of that water. And it's, it's dirty water, but it doesn't matter, right? It's water all the same. Soak that up. I'm going to put this palette in here. I'm going to clean my paintbrush off. Actually, okay, so I'll get to that in a second. Cleaning the paintbrush. I'm gonna put this back on top of here. You could probably make something like this out of Tupperware. All right, so this kind of seals up, and when it's sealed, this is an old one. I don't know if this is gonna work because it's kind of warped over the years. So that would enable that palette to stay nice and wet, so that I could come back tomorrow. I could come back on Thursday, just peel this lid off and start painting. Because so maybe I can just leave that like that. But you know what? Since I do want to show you guys how to clean up, and how I would clean up, I'm just going to show you here. So now I've got water dripping everywhere. Now, there's two ways that I could go about this. One of which is I could let this dry, and depending on the surface you have, what's kind of neat about it is if I let it dry is that for those of you who like to pick at things, when it's dry, I could spend like an hour kind of peeling it off. Sometimes get this really nice peeled piece of paint. And I have friends, I remember when I was in art school, who did this deliberately. Like they have a piece of plexiglass and they would paint brush strokes onto the plexiglass, let it dry, and then peel the brush strokes off, and then apply them onto a canvas like a collage. So that's one way of going about it. Now, I'm not going to do that, so I'm just going to take my rag, and I'm just going to wipe as much paint off as I can. And then I'm going to go to the sink, run this under the sink. And again, this just helps prevent the paint from going down into the sink and causing problems further downstream. So now I've got this rag, which is kind of gross. I could just toss this into the garbage, or again, I could just let this dry, and it's going to be kind of crunchy and gross in places, but you know, in 24 hours, this is going to be totally dry and I can use it for something else, right? So I'm going to look around where I'm going to put this, actually just, you know, here's my studio garbage, right? So I'm just going to take it and just lean it in here. And if I want to throw, if I, you know, next class I realize it's still too gross, I can just toss it. It's already halfway in the garbage, right? So I got that. So now I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna do this right now because you guys are watching and there's, you know, it's, how interesting is it to watch me clean? But I just, a little bit of water, a little bit of soap, rinse that off, and this will be nice and brand new. And one thing I do like about cleaning this up afterwards is if I'm kind of lazy, what can happen is later on, if I left it like this and then came back next class and started painting, I might actually peel some of the paint, the dried paint off, and that's when you start getting these weird little flakes of paint into your mixture, and that can drives me nuts anyway, right? So I'm not going to do that. I am just going to get a little bit of water here. Oh, and I've got so this is at the very end of a painting session. It's really important to clean your paintbrushes and any other, if you've got paint on your kitchen table or anything, right? I get my water and my brush, and I really want to make sure my brush is nice and clean, right? Because any paint that's left over there could potentially ruin your paintbrush. And yeah, okay, these paintbrushes are $1 a piece, not a big deal. But if I had a paintbrush that was a $50 paintbrush or a $200 paintbrush, and they exist out there, I've got a few of them over here, you know, taking care of them is really important. Because I would, you know, you wouldn't want to ruin a $200 piece of anything, whether it's a paintbrush or a pair of new shoes. You'd want to take good care of them. So you see, I'm repeatedly kind of going in here, cleaning my brush, and because each time, sometimes little bits of paint kind of come out, and what ends up happening is the paint can kind of get stuck in here. I believe, what is the ferrule, I think, this piece of metal or plastic that is holding the bristles in there. The paint often gets stuck up into there, right? So one thing is, you know, often when I'm cleaning up, I might just put my paintbrush in here for like 5 minutes while I'm doing other things, and then I come back to it, and that's allowed the water to kind of seep in there and eat away at some of that paint that was stuck up inside there. Now this isn't really critically important, but here's this paintbrush cleaner and preserver. I use this usually if I have my nicer paintbrushes. What this is it's like a, it's kind of like a soap for paintbrushes, and it really, like, paintbrushes just love it. Like, it's sort of like conditioner for your hair or something, right? You just sort of, all of a sudden the paintbrush, you just almost hear the paintbrush going, thank you for taking such good care of me. Some people, you can even leave it in the paintbrush overnight or until the next session, and it just, but already, like, that now feels like a brand new paintbrush. So I think, I can't remember, I think some people say you're supposed to wash it out, some people say you can leave it in. I think it just sort of depends on how dirty your paintbrush actually was, and it works really well, incidentally, for oil paint. If you're painting with oil paint, which is a whole other beast, and maybe when I'm done the acrylic class, maybe I'll do a whole 40 sessions of oil paint, which is 90% the same as 80% the same as acrylic paint. So, oh, so Peter's saying, can you show us the square one and why it might be helpful? So the reason why I made this one is, I guess I just wanted something a little bit different. You know, like this one up here, you know, is I guess more technically useful and I can refer to it. I guess I also think while I'm painting, is there a way I can make a color wheel that just looks nice and that I might want to hang on my wall? And so here, this was kind of my attempt at creating something a little bit differently. This is one of those 2 a.m. fever dreams that I had. I don't know, now I'm looking at it, maybe it's not that special after all. But, you know, you could, I think, Peter, you've been in my in-person painting class, and what we have done is actually make a painting while we're working on this, but I was a little bit afraid that it could be confusing for people when doing it over the internet, so that's why we didn't do that Sonia Delaunay painting today. So I don't think it's technically any more helpful than doing the circle one. It's just a little bit different, and I'm just indulging myself a little bit because I said this is probably the 60th or 70th time I've taught this class. I'm always like, there's got to be an interesting way to shake things up and make it a little more interesting for myself. Okay, let's see. Joyce says, thank you, look forward to next class. I can't believe, or Pat says, can't believe how easy it was to change colors. I learned a lot today. Looking forward to next time. Happy brushes, says Amy. Thank you. See you next Thursday. Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, right? Hit the little notification bell so when I post the next one, which I'll do in the next couple of hours, the thumbnail, you'll get a notification. It usually doesn't send you an email. It usually just shows up next time you open YouTube. It'll kind of show up at the top like this class, or when the class is starting, you might get a little message on your phone, depending on what your notification settings and all that, which you can disable all the time. But if you're interested in taking the class and you don't want to forget when it's happening, that's one way of doing it, right? Or let's say you're too busy on the day we're doing the class, then you just, it'll pop up and you can watch the class whenever you want. So like, subscribe. If you're finding this really helpful, I would love it if you shared it with some people. Share it with your friends. Post the link, which is just right below here under share. Copy and paste it to your Facebook or your Twitter or your Instagram. Take a photograph of the palette, the color wheel that you just made, you know, and hey, invite your friends, because personally, I think the world would be a much better place if everybody out there was painting and drawing and had some creative outlet for their emotions and all that frustrated energy we have, right? So it's kind of part of my mission in life is to democratize art, to share it with as many people as possible. And so letting your friends and family, people at work know that this is something you're up to would be great. And it's a great way of creating a little bit of a community during this bizarre world and time we're living in these days, right? So you and your friends can be all painting together and then afterwards comparing the results that you got, right? Because that's one thing I kind of miss about doing this online is I can walk around the room, and after the end of the day we can all kind of hang our pictures up and put them side by side. We're like, wow, it's so cool how similar and yet different they all are. And then lastly, there is a PayPal link below, and we're putting together the Patreon, so if you want to contribute some small amount, $1, $10, I've had in my drawing class people giving hundreds of dollars as thanks to, because this class is, you know, a little bit more expensive than free when you take it in person. So that when I taught the drawing class, I did those 40 episodes that just ended last week. People contributed enough to help me build all these shelves and to buy some of the cameras that were overheating, etc. So all that money that you generously donate goes right back into the show. Anyway, let's see if there's any more quick questions before I call it today. I think we're good, folks. So in the meantime, let your paintings dry. I think we had a great class today, so maybe this is a reason to go celebrate, to go pour yourself a glass of wine, or go for a jog, or however you celebrate. But this is the beginning of, I think, really the most amazing journey that you could have is a creative journey. I'm sure once you understand these basics, about the next 4 episodes are really the basics. Once you get that, and once we start really painting and making paintings that you can hang in your house and give to friends and then sell to strangers, it's going to change your life. It'll absolutely change your life. So I'm really happy to be here with you at the beginning of this journey. Okay, folks, so we will see you on Thursday, same time, same place. And until then, goodbye. We'll talk to you soon.